Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be working on an 89 Volkswagen Cabriolet. It's for anybody who can do it at home. I'm very limited on supplies, so yeah. What we're going to be doing, going to be replacing a coolant hose. But also during that time, I'm also going to be replacing an oil cooler and a thermostat, since the coolant will be drained out. These are the items right here that I have. I have a brand new oil cooler and two new oil cooling hoses. The original 3-way oil cooler hose, as you see right there, ruptured on this vehicle. And around where I live, nobody had that 3-way hose in stock. I would have to order it from the dealer, but the dealer was charging $160 just for that one hose. If anybody out there has any custom car or hot rod experience, of course you can be creative and do what you need to do in order to make it work without it. And the oil cooler, if you're living in a very hot climate, it helps. But other than that, you can go ahead and bypass the oil cooler if you know how to do it, or if you know somebody that knows how to do it creatively and right. So yeah, I have another quart of oil, new oil filter, two new hoses, the oil cooler seal, 27mm socket for the nut on the oil cooler, a new thermostat, and a new thermostat gasket. And we will jump right into it now. Alright, we drained the coolant, and the bottom hole, it's actually for the lower radiator hose, and the hole that's on top of that, the top hole, that's where the T-fitting goes in for the oil cooler. The way I bypass it is I went to the auto parts store and just looked at all their pre-molded formed hoses and looked for the reduction and trimmed the fit to go straight on. And the remaining of the hose from that trim to fit, stuck it on the oil cooler, and it just angles towards up from the mold, and I put a plug-in cap on it. And thus I was able to still use the vehicle until my parts come in. The lower hole, you can see the thermostat in there. Again, I don't know how long it's been, so I'm going to go ahead and change that out too. But right on bottom of that, we have the power steering bracket. So I'm going to have to be removing this power steering bracket in order to get to that thermostat. The middle hose is actually the hose that I had to trim to fit and use as temporary piece. The other two pieces, this is actually came off from this end, and then here's a piece of the other hose for this end. So as we match up the original part, you can see the reduction right here. So that's how that went. Alright, here we go. Power steering bracket is out. You have your tensioner, 2 bolts on the bottom, you got your pivot, you got another bolt, so when you look at it, it's actually going to be sitting in the car like this. And you have another bolt that goes right there where that my finger's at. There's going to be a total of 5 bolts coming out of this. You loosen out your bracket, and the bracket will come right out. And here it is, power steering pump is out. I'm just using the belt here to help hang it up out of the way. Let me come look up here. Here's your water pump, and there's where your thermostat housing is. Or I should say your thermostat outlet for the lower radiator hose. And there's the pipe that comes in from the heater core to your oil cooler, and again, that's the capped off hose that's still plugged in. You can see all that uh, old coolant just kind of caked on, so that kind of made me think of how long it's been since it was last changed. As I've read, these oil coolers tend to fail too, so if you're uncertain how long it's been to change it, again, once the coolant is out, you might as well change everything that you can. A little overlook view of it again. So next I'll be changing out this thermostat. Alright, here we go. We got thermostat housing off. And here's the gasket. When I pull it off, whoever changed it last put sealant on there like crazy. It's rubber, so you actually don't need it. The rubber seal, you don't need sealant on this at all. Yeah, so it actually looked a lot worse than this. I cleaned a lot of it up. And here's the new thermostat. And here is the new gasket. Now, if you're wondering, because it goes on at an angle, you can actually throw on this gasket. You can put the thermostat in. Actually, when you put it all in, you notice that, because since it goes in the housing through the bottom, you can actually line it up on the housing, stick your finger through, and you can actually hold the thermostat as you're putting it in position, and hold it in position, and then you can put your bolts on the housing, so that way you'll actually know that the thermostat is set in its centered spot. So that is the thermostat, rubber gasket, and the housing. Here's the housing right here. Again, a lot of sealant around here that I saw when I took the gasket off, or the housing off, and the thermostat and gasket was actually stuck in there. I went ahead and removed it, cleaned all the residue and coolant residue off on the flange, so we can have a clean mounting surface for the new thermostat and gasket, and also so we can make sure that we have a good sealant for the gasket itself. Don't forget, when you put the housing on, it is a recommended torque, but for those who are experienced, obviously you know how. And as you see on here on the housing, all this corrosion, you want to make sure you clean this corrosion off before you reinstall the hoses. So this one is the hose from your oil cooler and also your heater core. And right now, since the coolant is low, you can, if you don't know when your water pump's been changed, go ahead and replace that. If you're living in an area that normally doesn't stock German car parts, you want to plan ahead and make sure you have everything before you start tearing into the car, so that way you don't have to stop and run to the parts store and all of a sudden they don't have the parts that you need and you end up having to order it. But this pump has already been replaced before, and let's see, in that thermostat I'm going to go ahead and change it, because with the extent of how much sealant that was on it, I didn't want to take a chance that the sealant was going to actually damage the thermostat or cause any malfunction in any way. So, one thing to note when installing this thermostat into the housing, if you get a thermostat that actually has an air bleed, as you see right there, that little copper piece kind of dangling around, you want to go ahead and make sure that's pointing up, so you'll be able to bleed the system a little better. That's what the purpose is for that. It's for bleeding air out of the system, especially when a thermostat is still closed, because you want to make sure the coolant hits the thermostat in order for it to open and get a proper coolant flow. Um, but if you're a little more experienced, of course, you're gonna know the ways to do it by removing hoses and filling up the coolant, or if you have the vacuum fill system, of course you utilize that as well. But yeah, just make sure that is facing up, the highest point for air, and you'll be able to bleed the air out of the system. I thought I'd point that out. Alright, I went ahead and removed the oil filter to expose for the oil cooler. The seals on this also tend to go out from the mount from the cooler to the oil flange from the block. But as I was taking this out, I noticed when I was loosening it, the cooler in itself turned and it's loose. So I believe whoever did the install on this before didn't do it correctly. The nut on this is actually supposed to be torqued as well, so actually the whole thing is just loose. It's either that or also due to over tightening of the oil filter to the unit itself. But this is a 27mm nut, and I'll actually go ahead and drop it out since it's loose. Go ahead and remove the nut, and there's the oil cooler. As you see, there's the seal right there. It does look pretty old. There's a lot of coolant corrosion right there, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do a replacement on this. And there's the body, and we'll go ahead and snug up that pipe right there and throw on the new oil cooler. Just make sure when you put the seal on, just like an oil filter, you're going to coat the seal and then reinstall it and make sure it's in the right position for your lines. Okay, I have the new oil cooler installed. The nut on it is torqued, and I have the lower radiator hose connected and clamped. And I also have a new upper coolant hose. Right now I'm going to go ahead and leave this lower radiator hose disconnected as I put the power steering bracket back in and retension the belt for the power steering pump. As you see right here, there's the upper coolant hose clamped in. Alright, I now have the hoses all connected and the hose clamps clamped back in position, and I have a new oil filter installed, and the power steering bracket is back on. Now if you don't know what bolts again, it's going to be the tensioner. So you'll actually loosen the tensioner and loosen the securing bolt, another securing bolt, the two for the bracket to the engine block, and then you have a pivot. So the pivot was a long bolt, goes all the way across. And the bracket will come out. You have a bolt that's here, that you don't need to worry about. It's for the mounting bracket to the pump, and one up here. So that's behind the pulley. The ones behind the pulley you don't have to worry about. And when you're installing it, install everything loose. So be able to pivot the power steering. You can go ahead and secure these two to the engine block. But you'll need to leave your pivot loose. Securing bolt here, and then tighten the tension here and then secure it. And that's what it is for that. And up top, I went ahead and disconnected the upper radiator hose, and I'm going to go ahead and fill it up and let it go into the block. And that is it. So this is the basic tools that I used. I just had a flathead. I just used a flathead to scrape the scale off, corrosion scale. A 13 millimeter combo wrench, a 1/4 inch set. All of it's just a 6-point. 12 points fine. 13 millimeter and 3/8 drive, 3/8 ratchet. Assorted sizes of extensions, and of course my 1/4 inch drive set with extensions, and 3/8 set. But again, I've only used the 13 millimeter. That's for the power steering bolts on all bolts for the power steering. The 1/4 inch set was for the hose clamps. And that was about it. So now I'm just going to fill it back up, bleed the system, and make sure no leaks, and cap off the oil.